Do you approach life with a survive or thrive mentality? Or as I'll call it, survival or thrivival. I started this off a couple of episodes back by making a statement that the struggle is real. And I also proposed the thought that the struggle is relative. But if you go back to Maslow and think about our most basic needs, food, water, shelter, clothing, etc., and then go up that pyramid. In today's world, our most basic needs come down to our day-to-day bills for that, our utilities, our rent, our mortgage, our car payment if we have a car. Those things are survival today, and food, of course. So where and when does thriving or thrivival start? And what's that mean? And how do you get there? Welcome to episode 4 of season 2024, the No Bad Karma podcast. And today I'm going to be talking about my own instacarting for thrivival. And since I don't want to put the Instacart before the horse, let's take care of a little housekeeping first. As I started thinking about this season, I really just wanted to talk about some topics in a broader sense and how they apply to my life in terms of living and loving intentionally and the advice I try to give you. And really what I've been doing that because I believe living and loving intentionally is how we thrive. So, after we set the tone here, I'm intending to get into more specifics in future episodes on some of the points I've made. But in episode 3, I talked a little bit about work and work ethic and where it comes from, how it defines us, and how it can even translate to our relationships. And I mentioned earlier, again, in a past episode about the struggle being real and also being relative and also not being relative. And I really just want to dedicate a whole episode to that, as well as a whole episode to a survive or thrive mentality, right? But in thinking about all that and my own instacarting for thrivival, I wanted to put it out there. The feedback I've always gotten from people that listen to me are they appreciate what I say because it's raw and honest and open. And I'm talking about something really personal here. And I'm talking about it as I've talked about the past things as a learning experience and learning experience for me, a learning opportunity for you. So there's really 4 points that I wanted to cover in the whole instacarting for thrivival episode. But really, I have to talk about each one a little bit. So I'm intending to break it up into 4 episodes, one for each point. Today's episode where I'm introducing this idea and then talking about the 4 points. So before I mention those 4 points, I'm going to mention a new listener I picked up recently. I was out doing an Instacart order at a Target on McKnight Road in Pittsburgh, and I'm going through the register, and said it was an Instacart, and the girl that was working at the register at the Target said, "Oh, I never get Instacarts here, and I work here." So she has a job, and she's also Instacarting, for something else. Maybe it's just spending money or whatever, but that really struck me. And I went and put my order in the car. I went back in and I thought, I'm going to give her a card and tell her I'm going to do an episode on Instacarting for survival and thriving, because I had already planned it. And so if you're listening, your name was not on the receipt, so I can't give you a personal shout out, but thank you. I appreciate you. And I hope your Instacarting success is better than mine. All right, so let's get back to Instacarting for thrivival. And let me tell you the 4 topics I want to do. So I want to introduce that whole survival versus thrivival mentality. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. And then in the next episode, I'm going to give you some deeply personal specifics on what led me to Instacarting. And then third, I'll talk a little bit about that experience and what I've learned, the whole Instacarting. So if you're an Instacart shopper, you might want to listen. I'm sure you can give me tips, but I'll share what I've learned. And fourth, I want to talk a little bit about how to take something you don't want to do to survive and then turn it into something that would give you an opportunity to thrive. Because that's what I'm trying to do with my experience. That's what I am doing with my experience. All right, so let's get into today's episode and let's just talk about that whole survival versus thrivival mentality and what I'm talking about. So I was saying that in today's world, surviving is paying your bills for your essentials, getting your groceries for yourself and your family, getting your rent or mortgage paid, getting your utilities paid. In today's world, internet's an essential for most of us. It's all those basics, just to keep it really simple for a minute. You're covering those, you're surviving, right? So where does thriving or thrivival start? And what does that mean? So, in one sense, it's really personal. It depends on you, because what surviving is to you may be different than what surviving is to someone else, right? Having your food paid for and your rent and your utilities covered, for some people, they're thankful for that, and that's surviving. Other people, that's not enough. Now, I'm not judging you. I'm just pointing out that what you define as survival and what someone else defines as survival are two completely different things. Think about a homeless person on the street for a minute. What is surviving to them? Do they need shelter every night? They want it, but, they'll take whatever they can get. So survival is relative and thrivival is relative. But if we try to level the playing field for a minute and we talk about surviving as taking care of those basics, then we can have a starting point for talking about thriving and thrivival. So like I said, I'm going to try to dedicate a whole episode to this topic alone, a little differently later. But I want to tell you when I really started thinking about it and what triggered it for me. And, I'd heard the comments before, but it was about 10 years ago. I can't tell you exactly when, but it was about 10 years ago. And I was sitting in a service at a mega church with my family. And the pastor was talking about the message that day was about surviving versus thriving. And of course, it was talking about, following biblical principles in order to thrive. But again, that's not what this is about. It's about just surviving versus thriving and their approach on it. And ultimately, I realized that in my life, my family life, my business life, just my life as a whole, probably my relationship with my family even, at that time was somewhere in between. It's not like all those things weren't not thriving, right? It was more than survival. Maybe I assumed it was thriving on some level, right? And I base that even when I wrote this as I was thinking about it, and a lot of people would base it on this. It's on what you think what you have. I've said the only things that matter are the things that matter, and they're not the things, right? So, like I said, we had a lot of things people didn't. We had really good health insurance. My daughter was getting a great education at a private school. We had 2 cars. One of them was fully paid for. The other one, I think both were fully paid for at that time. I had a mortgage that was in good standing. Maybe it was late sometimes. Maybe I really pushed the envelope sometimes. But I had a mortgage, kept it up at some point, even if I fell behind. We took vacations. We went out. If we were out late and said, oh, let's pick something up for dinner, we could and did. We didn't, my ex-wife and I didn't have as many day nights as we should have, but we had a lot of family day nights. We had regular takeout nights where we would, get a pizza from this place or get Chipotle and watch movies. Yet really, after I heard that message, I think on some level I started to realize that I was just surviving. I wasn't making and really, it came down as I thought back to that time and thought about what I did at that time, which how I reacted, which is what I'm going to talk about in a second. I realized I was just surviving back then on some level, and if I really wanted to do some of these other things, I had to. I had to react. I had to do something, right? And as I was thinking about that time, I know I wasn't making changes in my business that I thought could move it forward. I had some ideas, some things I wanted to do, but I didn't really push them. Even though when I heard this message, that was a good period in our marriage. We weren't as a couple really setting life goals together. I mean, we were, but we weren't. We were more or less defining what would be acceptable. Now, if you're a regular listener, a lot of that I feel, especially today, goes back to my drinking and how I, ultimately didn't deal with difficult decisions. I just numbed them. And over time, that takes a toll. But back then, when I started thinking about that whole survive or thrive, survival or thrivival, as I call it now, mentality, I can tell you in short what my reaction was. And the reaction was I wasn't doing well enough. And that stimuli, all those things I was thinking about, brought on a response that most of us would do. Almost anybody would say, I have to work harder. I have to do better at the job I have. For me, I have to do better in the business I'm in. As a self-employed person, I focus first literally on what I had. The business at hand, the software I sold, the services I sold. That wasn't the right answer. I mean, I was thinking about doing other things. I was thinking about expanding my services. I was thinking about focusing on my services. I was thinking about picking up another software package back then. I had a lot of things I could have done. I was thinking about writing my own add-on for things that people would always ask me to build for them. I had a lot of ideas, right? I should have been asking myself then, I should have been asking myself, what do I want? What do I want to do? How do I want to thrive, right? Not what should I be doing better right now to get what I want? How do I work with what I have to get what I want? Now, I'm a smart guy. I can't believe I reacted that way as I look back on it. But I wasn't taking steps to thrive. But like I said, I was doing better than just surviving. I was existing. So this was probably around 2013, 2014, like I said, 10 years ago. Fast forward to February 19 to April 2019, 5 years later. after I've had my affair, right after I quit drinking, right after she leaves. I'm divorced now. And I had nothing at all. I mentioned in previous episodes, I took a 5-minute video that day. I recently showed that to my partner, or a few months ago, showed that to my partner, and she can vouch for it. I had nothing. And survival mode kicked in. And I didn't just want the basics to survive back then. I needed them. I needed the basics to survive. And I would struggle till the end of that year, till the end of 2019, ultimately from February to December 2019, just to survive, right? And when you're just surviving, I went from needing to survive to continuing to survive. And in that, there's no stability. That's what you don't have. So that's really what you want next before you can even thrive. So for me, what happened for me around that time, around the end of 2019, and this leads into what I'm going to talk about in the next episode, what the personal stuff about what happened to me, which has put me behind the wheel on instacarting. But back in 2019, this old employer wanted me to go back to work for him full time. I was doing some work for him and wanted me to go back full time. So I had needs. He understood that. I told him what they were, and he couldn't meet them, but we made it. He also understood that I wanted to do something else eventually. So we came to an agreement. And that agreement provided that next step after survival, stability. See, you can survive without stability. But it's hard. And stability will make thriving much easier. But you can take steps towards thriving, towards thriving, even when you're not stable. And that's what I'm calling thrivival, right? You're pursuing surviving and thriving at the same time. So like I said, this was 2020, right? What happens next? What happens in 2020? COVID. So as topsy-turvy as that turned the world, you know what COVID did for us? Stability. It provided stability, even though it made everybody unstable for a minute. It ultimately provided stability for all of us. And the other thing it did is it put us all on a level playing field in some fashion, right? Didn't matter how nice of a house you lived in or how crappy of a house you lived in. Your store was still closed. You still couldn't go get what you needed. At least for a few days till they figured that out, right? But we all had the same challenges. But like I said, COVID provided a lot of stability for people. It gave employers an opportunity to get money from the government. If you were smart and your business had to shut down and you had changes you needed to make, that would have been a great time to do it. It made businesses work smarter and work remotely. But it put us all on the same level playing field. So again, this is 2020, and I had stability for the first time, and the nature of the world and of the COVID world provided stability too, because as somebody who was rebuilding their life, so many people stopped, suspended your required payments, suspended legal action, suspended this, suspended that. It gave us all time. So, like I said, it would take me 2020, that stability I had in 2020 gave me the chance, gave me the opportunity to start acquiring the things that I needed just to survive. Like a bed, pans, cooking utensils, things like knives. Furniture, most of it came from a Goodwill or a St. V's. It would take me all of 2020. But I was finally a boy again. Those things I talked about earlier about wanting to thrive. Well, if you've listened to past episodes, you know that this my whole mantra of giving your choices purpose, of trying to live and love intentionally, came from 2019. So I was already laying groundwork for things I wanted to do to thrive because I wanted my life to change. I never wanted to be back in that place again, right? But was I really pursuing and working hard on those things at that time? I was, yes, I was working on them, but they were also on hold a little bit, right? Because I couldn't work on them the way I wanted to. I couldn't pursue them daily like I wanted to. I had a full-time job. I couldn't give all my time to my side projects and the thing I was trying to accomplish and rebuilding my life, because all that takes work. I've spoken before. I used to spend up to 16 hours a day in front of the computer. That's no lie. But part of surviving for me wasn't just getting those essentials taken care of. It allowed me to keep the opportunity to thrive alive because I never lost sight of what I was trying to accomplish. And it would allow me to pay the essentials I needed to set the stage for thriving, like all my business expenses, my podcast hosting services, my subscriptions. Right? Survival for me was paying some of the essentials I needed to thrive later. When we talk about what's relative, that's how I'm different. So surviving for me includes a few other things. And I was lucky in another way too, because the opportunity I had with my old employer also enabled me to learn, or further, I should say, some business skills that I wanted to use in my thriving goals, in terms of doing some of those things I wanted to do and should have done 10 years earlier when I was sitting listening to that message the first time. And instead I reacted and worked with what I had. So the stability I had in 2020 was good, right? So now 2021's coming up and my gig's supposed to be over, but he wants to keep me another year because COVID was still going on. Made sense. Couldn't have been more thankful to continue that stability. It empowered me to take some further steps in my recovery, right? Because I had I had stability now. I had footing. Now that's an important point, because all during that time, I could have been flipping burgers at McDonald's or instacarting or working some other job. It doesn't necessarily matter what you're doing, but it does, because whatever you're doing, you need to figure out what I'm doing will help me thrive later, right? As long as the effort is somehow contributing to the survival without sacrificing the thrivival, then it doesn't matter. But here's the risk when you're surviving. And in some ways, it's the definition of surviving. You're just on the wheel of life. And after 3 months more of being on the wheel of life, now about 2 years sober, having spent a year establishing survivability with some degree of stability, I found myself on that wheel of life. So let me tell you what the wheel of life meant for me in 2021, those first 3 months of 2021. And there's a whole episode about the wheel of life, but the wheel of life to me meant I had just finally reestablished health insurance. I had my first policy in since October, November 17. I had a 98 Chevy Astro van. I even took that thing on a couple dates. I drove it to a couple business meetings. Cargo van. That was survival to me. Finally having health insurance again, having a vehicle that got me somewhere. Thriving would mean buying a car. Speaking of wheel of life. And that first need, knowing I wanted to get a car again, also made me realize, and part of what the wheel of life is about, that I needed that to thrive. And it would also put me on the wheel of life because now I'd have a car payment, right? So it was when I first started asking myself, and I've spoken about this a couple times now, that's really when I said, what do I want my life to look like? Let me tell you about getting the car. Because I had a car guy, my ex-wife and I had at that point bought or leased 6 cars between our pre-marriage, marriage, and even our post-marriage years from this car guy. And I needed a car, so I called him up and I said, "Hey, Arthur, it's me. How's it going?" "How's it going?" he said back to me. He recognized who I was right away. "Subprime" was my answer. So if you know finances, you know what that means. But he helped me figure out how to get a car, told me what I needed to do, and it took me a couple weeks, and I put the pieces in place, and I got a car. But that whole conversation there's a few points, right? Because my life was subprime. I wasn't thriving. I was just surviving. I was keeping some essentials ready to thrive, right? Like I said, my business expenses kept them up and stuff. But, I wasn't thriving yet. I had it in mind. But I didn't know how to get to that next step. And that's an important little point because you don't have to know the answer. You just have to ask the right people. And in this case, I asked my car guy, right? But the wheel of life, surviving, is debt. And that step was going to bring on debt. And like I said, I knew it was time to define my life. And really, it was a dark time for me. It was when I ended up starting this podcast. I don't even know how else to say it. It was a dark time because here I was. This is 2021, right? I'm 2 years into my struggle already. And every step I start making, like reestablishing health insurance, I was able to do that because I just finally had the basics to survive. So I didn't need to spend quite as much money each paycheck on those things I was buying just to survive and get back to, like I said, being a boy again, being somewhat normal again. Right? I was now taking some of that money because I didn't need to spend it on those things anymore. Now I was going towards health insurance, but now that pretty much wiped out the rest of it again. So here I was again, still just surviving, but needed that car. Right? And I was like, this is when I thought about that whole survival versus thriving message I heard again. Because I just knew it was time to define what I wanted my life to be. I wasn't going to ride the wheel of life. Now, I'm going to mention this again later, but this is really interesting because this is around April 2021, and my partner today, she was at the same point I was then. She didn't have to deal with the 2 years prior like I did, but she was taking steps in her life at the exact same time, 4 hours away. Didn't know her yet. Never met her, never talked to her. Well, maybe we matched on Bumble once and I didn't realize it. But the point is, that's one of the things that has brought us together now. But this was 2 years ago. And I'm going to talk more about her and how she's on the verge of thriving too. But that's what I'm saying. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. You can say your New Year's resolution, like I talked about in the first episode, maybe give something a year and that's fine because some things do not happen overnight. So in April 2021, I defined how I wanted to live my life. And really that process was pretty easy. It went on for a couple months, actually, because I was so excited about it. I loved it. It made me think of everything. And I just sat down one day, like I should have done 10 years earlier when I heard that message, and I asked myself that question. And the question wasn't, what is surviving and what is thriving? The question was, what would bring me joy? Pure joy in my life. Knowing I got to go to work every day, knowing you got bills to pay. Why do you want anything other than joy in everything you do? So for me, I love my work, so there was joy in a certain aspect of work that I wanted to focus on. I have always been involved with other organizations, very involved in my churches, including that mega church I mentioned. I helped out there quite a bit too, even though it wasn't my primary church. But that period of my life where I did most of that work was over with the family church I worked with, and but in that work. In that altruistic work, I kept seeing ways where I could use my pure skills to make things better. Specifically, I got real involved in the food pantry at our church, and I see all kinds of opportunities to improve that process and help those organizations out using skills I have. And you could say, well, that's a commercial opportunity, but that's using what you have, right? That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to pimp my altruism. I wanted to give something that was easy for me to give because it would bring me joy. And then life People talk about bucket lists, and I've mentioned this before too. I think I don't call them bucket lists or life lists, because what do you want to do in life? What would bring you joy? And you may be thinking, what's this have to do with instacarting for thrivival? Oh, I'm getting there because, I've worked remotely my entire life. I can do it from anywhere, right? I could see when I think about what brings me joy, why am I not seeing the country like I've always wanted to, all the different parts? I've always wanted to take advantage of those last minute weekend airfare sales and just go wherever the opportunity brings you, the opportunity presents itself. Then and now, still, I have a dog that pretty much goes everywhere with me. So I might not be able to take advantage of those airfare sales. But why can't I see the country in a car and camper? So think about this for a minute, because this is, like I said, back in April 2021. And I'm talking about living and loving intentionally, and where that process really took the next footing for me, the next step in establishing that footing. And one of those things is one of the other questions. And when we talk about these personal things that a person asks himself, that I ask myself, is what would bring me joy in my personal life? And yes, that applied to my family and my daughter, of course. But what kind of partner did I want? And the answer there was really simple too. It was someone that wanted to live the way I wanted to do, that I want to. Someone I could build things with. Work, be it your job or at your relationship, it isn't just a means to an end. It should be a means to joy. Everything you do. And I needed someone that understood that and felt that way. So here it is, April 2021. And I'm really setting out to thrive. Another year, I said. Another year. I had 2 years under my belt. Another year. I had that stability again. Another year. That was 3 years ago. And that's going to bring me to point 2 of this series. What is it that has led me to instacarting in the pursuit of survival and thrivival? And like I said, I'm going to get kind of personal there. But you're going to have to wait for that one. And while you do, just know I'm instacarting to give my choices a purpose bigger than myself. And you should do the same. See you soon.